I never thought a sentence like that would ever come out of my mouth. But the first time I looked at her, I knew I was already walking toward the kind of trouble you can't unwalk from. It started on a Tuesday, in the kind of place where nothing ever really happens. A repair shop tucked between a bakery and a laundromat. The fluorescent lights hummed above us, the smell of oil and warm metal hanging heavy in the air. I was 23, still convincing myself I knew what I was doing with my life. She walked in like she didn't belong there, and maybe that's why I noticed her. A dark navy coat draped over her shoulders, hair pinned up like she had someplace more important to be. The kind of presence that makes you stand a little straighter without realizing you've moved. Her car needed work. Nothing major, just a battery issue. But the way she leaned against the counter while I explained it, I caught myself forgetting the words halfway through. She didn't rush me, though. She didn't say much at all, actually. Just watched, calm and patient, her eyes sharper than they needed to be. When she finally did speak, it was low and measured. "You sound like you've done this 100 times. I shrugged, suddenly aware of the grease on my hands. "Maybe 99. Her mouth tilted, not quite a smile, but something that felt heavier. For a second, the shop felt too quiet, the hum of the lights swallowed by the pause between us. I should have looked away, but I didn't. There was a weight in her silence, as if she had more she could have said, but chose not to. It left me searching her face, trying to catch what she wasn't giving me. When I finally slid her paperwork across the counter, our fingers brushed. Nothing dramatic, just the quick scrape of skin against skin. But she pulled her hand back with the kind of care that felt deliberate, like she knew even that small contact mattered. I pretended to check the form again, though I'd already double-checked it. My throat was dry. "You'll have it back tomorrow," I said, and it came out rougher than I meant. Her eyes lingered on me for a moment longer than necessary, then she nodded. "Thank you." 2 words, soft, almost formal, but I carried them with me all night. Later, after the shop closed and the air smelled less like oil and more like rain sneaking in through the open windows, I sat on the bench out back replaying that pause, that brush of her hand. It wasn't attraction, not yet. It was something quieter, something unspoken, like standing on the edge of a sentence you weren't brave enough to finish. I didn't know her name until I checked the paperwork again. Elena. And somehow, just that was enough to keep me awake. 2 days later, Elena showed up just as I was locking the shop for lunch. She carried herself the same way as before, composed, self-contained. But there was something different in her face this time. A faint tightness around her mouth, as if she'd been holding her breath all morning. "I thought you'd pick it up later," I said, sliding the keys from my pocket again. She shook her head, eyes lowered. "Needed the car earlier than I thought." We stepped back inside together. The shop smelled of rubber and gasoline, a smell I'd grown numb to, but she wrinkled her nose slightly, almost in amusement. I caught the small lift of her eyebrow, the almost laugh she didn't give voice to, and I felt the corners of my mouth twitch in response. While I went through the papers, she leaned against the counter again, one hand resting lightly on her wrist. I noticed her fingers, elegant, a little pale, the nails short and unpolished. She tapped once, then stopped, as if realizing it gave away more than she wanted. "You seem tired," I said, before I could think better of it. Her eyes flicked up, sharp, then softened. A pause. "Long week." That was all she gave me, but it was enough. There was weight in those 2 words, the kind of weight you only hear if you're listening. I handed her the keys, and she held them without moving for a moment. Her thumb ran over the ridged metal like she was grounding herself. Then she looked at me, really looked, as if considering whether she should say something else. But the moment slipped away. She cleared her throat lightly. "Everything's good to go. Run smooth now," I said. "Battery won't give you trouble again." She nodded, but her hand lingered on the keys. Her other hand tightened on the strap of her bag. A gesture so small most people wouldn't notice, but I did. It was the kind of grip that said she was holding more than just leather, something heavier she wasn't going to name. I wanted to ask. Instead, I said nothing. When she finally turned to leave, I walked her out without realizing I'd followed. At the door, she paused, the late afternoon light catching in her hair, softening her in a way I hadn't seen before. "Thank you," she said again, quiet, almost like an afterthought. And then, it happened. She almost reached out, like she might place her hand on my arm, but she stopped halfway. Her fingers curled against her palm, and she pulled them back as if the thought itself had been too much. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It stretched, filled with everything neither of us would say. I watched her step into her car, the engine humming steady because of me, and all I could think was, she almost touched me. Almost. It was raining the night I stayed late at the shop. The storm came sudden, hammering against the roof hard enough to drown out the radio. I just finished cleaning up when I noticed headlights flashing outside. Elena. She stepped in with the rain clinging to her coat, drops catching on her hair. She looked different tonight. Not polished, not collected, just tired. Vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. "Sorry to bother you this late," she said, voice low, almost apologetic. "Something's rattling under the hood." I didn't know where else to go. I nodded, taking the keys from her. "You're not bothering me." Her eyes lingered a second too long, as if measuring whether she believed me. While I bent over the engine, she stayed close, closer than she needed to. Her perfume, subtle, earthy, with something sharp underneath, mixed with the smell of rain and metal. I could feel her presence more than hear her. "You always work this late?" she asked. "Not always," I said, wiping my hands. "Sometimes I just don't feel like going home." She hummed, a sound caught between agreement and something else. Then, quieter, "I know that feeling." The way she said it, almost swallowed, made me glance up. For a moment, neither of us spoke, just the storm filling the silence. Her hand was resting on the workbench, fingers drumming softly, like she needed to give them something to do. I wanted to ask what she meant, what she was avoiding, but before I could, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, then quickly flipped it face down. "Do you need to?" "No." She cut in, sharper than intended. Then softer, almost guilty. "No. Not right now." Something twisted in my chest. Whoever it was, an ex, a friend, someone waiting, she chose to stay here instead. The car was fine, nothing major. I told her that, but neither of us moved toward the door. The storm made the world outside disappear, and the shop felt suddenly too small. She leaned back against the bench, arms crossed, watching me. I could see the hesitation flicker in her eyes, like words pressing at the back of her throat, but refusing to come out. And then it happened. Not words, but closeness. She shifted nearer, her shoulder almost brushing mine. For one impossible second, I thought she might actually let the space close. My hand twitched at my side, caught between wanting to reach and knowing I shouldn't. The lights above flickered with the storm. She exhaled sharply, breaking whatever it was, and stepped back half a pace. Her voice came steadier, distant. "Thank you for checking it." I nodded, pretending my pulse wasn't still racing. "Anytime." She left with the rain still falling hard around her, but the air inside felt heavier than before. I stood at the door long after her taillights vanished, my hands still tingling with the thought of how close hers had been. Almost. Again. The shop was almost empty that evening, just the hum of a ceiling fan pushing stale air around. I was finishing paperwork when Elena stepped in. She didn't need anything. Her car had been fine since the last visit, but she came anyway. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching me write. I could feel her eyes on the back of my hand, the way my pen scratched the paper. The silence stretched until I had to look up. "You're here late again," she said softly. I nodded. "So are you." Neither of us smiled. She glanced around the room as if searching for a reason to explain herself, but no reason came. The space between us felt heavier than it had before, like the silence itself was waiting for someone to break it. Finally, she did. Her voice was low, but it cut clean through the quiet. "What are we doing?" The words hung there, stark and impossible to dodge. My throat tightened. I wanted to say something clever, something that would make it easier. Instead, all I managed was, "I don't know." She exhaled, her shoulders slumping for the first time since I'd met her. The confidence she usually carried like armor slipped, and underneath was something raw, tiredness, maybe, or fear. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. But you are, I said too quickly. Her eyes snapped to mine, sharp at first, then softer. There was a long pause, her gaze holding mine longer than it should have. She looked like she wanted me to say more, to hand her an excuse she could believe in. I didn't have one. The clock on the wall ticked, loud and uneven. I could hear the sound of her breathing, steady but fragile, like she was holding it together by force. You're too young, she murmured finally, as if testing the words out loud. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched the way her hands tightened on her bag, the knuckles paling. She wasn't saying it to push me away. She was saying it like she was reminding herself of a rule she didn't believe in. Does it matter? I asked quietly. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She looked down, shaking her head once, sharp, as though stopping herself from admitting something she didn't want written in the air. The silence grew unbearable. Every unspoken thing pressed closer, crowding the room. And then, she said it. The line that gutted me, that made it impossible to pretend we were just two strangers crossing paths. I can't remember the last time someone saw me. Her voice cracked on the word saw, and the room went completely still. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Because in that moment, she wasn't my boss, or a woman twice my age, or someone I should have been careful with. She was just Elena, and she was breaking, quietly, right in front of me. The rain had cleared, leaving the night air sharp and clean. Elena lingered after closing, sitting on the low bench by the shop's side door while I shut the lights. She didn't speak, didn't fidget, just stared out into the dark lot like she was waiting for something that wouldn't come. When I sat beside her, the wood creaked softly. For a while, neither of us said a word. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable, but it pressed close, demanding. She broke it first. You remind me of someone. Her tone wasn't casual. It carried a weight that made me turn toward her. She was still looking straight ahead, jaw tight. Who? I asked carefully. My brother, she said after a long pause. He was younger than me. Always thought he had time to figure everything out. He didn't. The words landed heavy, but she didn't elaborate. She just clasped her hands in her lap, twisting them once, then letting them rest still. I didn't push. The silence between us felt sacred now, not something to fill. After a minute, she dug into her bag and pulled out her phone. She stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then turned it toward me. A photo. Her, years younger, arm around a man in his 20s, grinning wide. His eyes carried the same restless spark people often teased me about. He died 5 years ago, she said simply. I swallowed, my chest tightening in a way I couldn't name. I looked from the photo to her face. Older now, steadier, but with a crack running through the middle she tried hard to hide. I didn't mean to, I started, then stopped. You didn't do anything wrong, she said, almost too quickly. Then softer. It's not your fault you look at me the way he used to. Like I wasn't invisible. Her voice caught on that last word. She pressed the phone to her chest and exhaled sharply, as though holding the grief down with force. Something shifted inside me then. This wasn't just attraction, wasn't just curiosity or obsession. She wasn't just my boss. She was a woman who had carried silence for 5 years, and I had stumbled into it without knowing. I didn't touch her. I didn't know if I could. Instead, I said the only thing that felt honest. I see you. She turned to me then, slowly, like the movement cost her. Her eyes shone, not with tears exactly, but with something raw, the effort of not breaking. For a moment, neither of us breathed. And in that silence, everything changed. The night she came back, she didn't bother with excuses. No car trouble, no paperwork. Just Elena, standing in the doorway of the shop after closing, her coat drawn tight though the air was warm. I didn't ask why she was there. Some questions already carried their answers. We sat in the back, on the same bench by the side door where she had shown me her brother's photo. The hum of distant traffic filled the silence. She rested her hands on her knees, fingers laced, as though holding herself together. I can't keep coming here like this, she said finally. Her voice was steady, but the words trembled beneath it. I know, I said. She turned to me, studying my face, maybe searching for disappointment or anger. But all I could give her was quiet. You make it hard, she whispered. I almost asked what I made hard, but I knew. Instead, I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, close enough to feel the warmth of her beside me. The silence grew thick again, filled with things unsaid, until she exhaled slowly. "I'm tired of pretending I don't feel it," she admitted, barely louder than the sound of her breath. The words hit like a weight lifted and placed at the same time, freeing, but heavier than anything else we had carried. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. My throat locked, and all I could do was stare at the way her hands trembled, just slightly, against each other. Finally, I reached out. Not bold, not certain, just enough to let my fingers brush against hers. She didn't pull away. Her hand was cool, but her grip tightened instantly, as if she had been waiting for someone to hold on to. We stayed like that, hands clasped, not moving, not speaking. It felt less like a beginning and more like a surrender, two people finally giving in to what had been circling them for weeks. After a long while, she leaned her head against my shoulder. The weight of it was gentle, grounding. I closed my eyes, letting the quiet wash over us. No declarations, no promises, just the truth, sitting there in the open where neither of us could deny it anymore. "I don't know where this leads," she murmured. "Neither do I said. Her breath warmed against my neck, her hand tightening in mine. That was enough. For the first time, there was no need to fill the silence. It wasn't empty anymore. It was us. I think about those nights more often than I'd ever admit out loud. The shop, the rain, the pauses that stretched longer than they should have. Back then it felt like standing too close to a fire you weren't supposed to touch, but I touched it anyway. And so did she. It wasn't a love story in the way people expect. No sweeping declarations, no perfect ending tied up in a bow. What we had was quieter, messier, something that lived in the spaces between words, in a glance too long or a silence too heavy to ignore. I was 23, restless, reckless without meaning to be. She was in her 40s, carrying more history than I could have imagined at the time. And yet, somehow, when our worlds collided, we both stopped running for a while. She taught me that being seen isn't the same as being watched. That sometimes the most intimate thing you can give someone is the room to be who they are when they think no one notices. And maybe I gave her something too. Not stability, not certainty, but the reminder that she could still feel, still be wanted, still have a hand to hold in the dark. Looking back now, I realize love doesn't always look like forever. Sometimes it looks like sitting on a bench in a quiet shop, sharing silence with someone who makes you feel less alone. Sometimes it looks like almost touching, almost speaking, until one day you finally do. We didn't promise the world to each other. We didn't need to. What we had was enough to change the way I see it. Love, connection, the way two people can meet in the middle of their scars and still find light. Elena once told me she couldn't remember the last time someone saw her. I remember that every time I think of her. Because that night, and every night after, I saw her. And she saw me. That was the whole story. And maybe that's why, even now, when I hear the hum of fluorescent lights or smell rain on asphalt, I find myself smiling. Because some connections don't fade. They just live quietly inside you, reshaping the way you walk through the world. So, if you've listened this far, tell me, have you ever had a moment like that? A person who didn't stay forever, but still changed you in a way you'll never forget? Because that's what she was to me.